slip away across the universe. Pools of sorrow, waves of joy are drifting through my open mind, possessing and caressing me. Guru Devo, nothing's gonna change my world. Nothing's gonna change my world. Images of broken light which dance before me like a million eyes that call me on and on across the universe. Thoughts meander like a restless wind inside a letterbox. They tumble blindly as they make their way across the universe. Tiger nothing's gonna change my world. Nothing's gonna change my world. Sounds of laughter, shades of earth are ringing through my open ears, enticing and...
Hi everyone, we'll be starting in 10 minutes, so do grab a drink from behind and grab a seat and make yourself comfortable. Thank you.
Undying love that shines around me like a million suns and calls me on and on across the universe. Guru Devo, nothing's gonna change my world. 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 Darling, I can tell what you're feeling burns like hell, and we don't always get to choose. It's winning battle we all lose.
Darling, I can see the light in you, it's the light in me. If we try to give in up, these things in life return us.
When you love someone, and if it brings you to your knees. When you love someone, take it in and let it be. And it might break your heart in two, but what you give comes back to you. When you love someone, when you love someone, we move in and out, a million pieces all around. So lay your heart out on the line. It's never wrong to fight for what makes you feel alive. When you love someone, and if it brings you to your knees. When you love someone, it might break your heart in two. What you give comes back to you when you love someone. When you love someone, it's the strength that you'll find when you're falling behind. It's the light in the dark, it's the fire that it starts when you love someone. And if it brings you to your knees, when you love someone, take it in and let it be. And it might break your heart in two, but what you give comes back to you when you love, when you love. When you love someone, when you love someone. I know you so well, so well. I mean, I can do anything that he can. I'll be pretty, I know you somewhere, somewhere. I've been trapped in my mind, girl, just holding on. I don't wanna pretend we're something we're nothing. I'm stuck thinking about her, I can't hold on. I'm in pain and I'm in pain.
Wanna put 10 shots to my brain. I've been tripping about some things can't change. Suicidal, same time I'm tame. Picture this in bed, get a phone call. Girl that you fucked with killed herself. That was the summer and nobody helped. And ever since then, man, I hate myself. Wanna fucking end it, pessimistic. All wanna see me with no pot to piss in, but haters been excited about the grave I'm digging. Having conversations about my hate decisions, fucking sickening. At the same time, memories surface of the grapevine about my uncle playing with the Slipknot. Post-traumatic stress got me fucked up, been fucked up since a couple months ago. I play it locked up.
Pain, I'll be feeling pain, just hold on. And I don't feel the same, I'm so numb. I'll be feeling pain, I'll be feeling pain, just hold on. And I don't feel the same, I'm so numb. I know you so well, I know you. I mean, I can do anything that he can. I've been pretty. Pray to God, but I'm feeling like he's going there. Now when I lean on you and I got nothing left, hey, I've been wanting to call you, tell you that I'm sorry. Same old story, everybody's singing. I say I'm okay, but I guess I'm a liar. You say you're okay, but I saw that you lied.
Welcome everyone and thank you for joining us for today's event. I'm Zing from SG Innovate and today we are very happy to have Ocean Protocol here with us to start off our very first data dialogue series. At SG Innovate, we believe Singapore has the capabilities and resources to tackle hard problems from around the world. And part of our efforts include knowledge sharing sessions like the one you are here for today. So without further ado, I'll hand over the mic to Mike Anderson, the CTO of DEX, as well as the founding member of Ocean Protocol. Mike, please.
Thank you. Check this works. So hello everyone, and thanks for coming along. So I'm Mike Anderson, I'm CTO at DEX, and proud to be talking a little bit about what we're doing at the Ocean Protocol tonight. And the topic of this talk is data sharing without sharing data, which sounds a bit paradoxical, but hopefully we go through, I'll explain what that means and why Ocean Protocol is what we believe is one of the solutions to this kind of challenge. So first of all, I'd like to say a little bit about what is Ocean Protocol. We define it as a decentralized data exchange protocol to unlock data for AI. So probably in this audience, I don't need to go on for very long about how important and transformative AI is going to be in the world. We're seeing amazing use cases, amazing innovations in the space of AI throughout the world. But so why does it need a decentralized data exchange protocol? I think Ocean was founded on a couple of observations. First of all, we've got these incredible innovations going on around AI. I've actually myself been involved in deep learning and some of the open source projects around deep learning technology, and I've worked with many AI startups, and there's fantastic innovation going on in the algorithms and the data processing capabilities, and it's an amazing space. But if you've ever worked in that space, and I'm guessing some people, who in this space works for like an AI startup or some company with algorithmic technology? Okay, a few, yeah? You probably know the pain that certainly I've experienced, is you just cannot get your hands on the data to actually make the most of your algorithms. And an observation about the current state of AI is basically the more data you have, the better your models and the better your predictive technology can perform. And that's true pretty much across the board, yeah? At the same time, you've got many multinationals, big organizations, corporations that are just sitting on mountains of data, vast amounts of data, which they generate through the course of their everyday activities, their customer databases, their operational logs, sensor data coming in continuously, data that they're getting from all their partners, from their supply chains, huge amounts of data. But they typically don't actually have the skills to make the most of that data. And even if they do have some of the skills, they can't really join up the data in many disparate parts of the organization to actually make the most of it. So an observation we had in Ocean, and as we founded it, was, well, this means there's very few companies in the world are really in a position to unlock the power of AI. They're basically your Facebooks, your Googles of the world, who both have a large amount of data because of the nature of their business, and also have the scale and the engineering talent to really build their own AI platforms and solutions to exploit that data. Now, I guess we've found on a value, which we think that power, economic power, the value of data should be available to everyone. And we have this very much a mission of AI for good in what we're trying to do at Ocean Protocol. And in fact, Ocean Protocol is a non-profit foundation, so that we actually, we mean it when we say that creating good for the world is at the core of what we do. So two companies came together to build the Ocean Protocol. The first is DEX. DEX is a Singapore-based company that's been building, I guess, more traditional data marketplaces for many years, been involved in a lot of sort of this innovation scene in Singapore and sharing data for hackathons and building sandboxes to enable corporates to experiment with data technologies. And BigChainDB is our partner company in Berlin. They are, I think, quite a long-standing blockchain company, famous for their decentralized database, which has been adopted for many enterprise blockchain projects and solutions. So basically, we brought together the experience of data marketplaces with the blockchain technology, and together we founded Ocean Protocol. So I guess the concept here is we're going to use blockchain to connect data and AI. And this is going to enable us to create the foundations for a new data economy, and we're doing it in an open way. It's an open source protocol. Anyone can use it. It's free to use. And most importantly, we're trying to give power back to data owners and the people who sort of possess these data assets and the innovators who are able to make value out of it. So I'm going to go a little bit of a detour. A quick question to the audience. Who's involved in blockchain, in a company that uses blockchain actively? Okay, small number. I'll talk a little bit then about why blockchain. What do we want to do with it? So blockchain's basically a decentralized ledger technology. You can use it to track things, and a key concept is that no one controls the blockchain. Yeah, it's just data gets disseminated across a large number of different nodes, and it reaches consensus. So effectively, it's a public record of what's happened, whether that's tracking assets or tracking the movement of a cryptocurrency. So why would we want to use it for data? Well, there's a few important reasons, and they're all related to the challenges with traditional data sharing. Because people have been sharing data for years. This is not new. This has been going on since the founding days of information technology. But the problems, first of all, you often had to build very bespoke solutions, depending on your particular type of data, depending on the data scale, depending on what technology platforms people individually used in the different corporations. And it could take a long time to build these data exchange solutions, particularly when it's crossing organizational boundaries and you typically have commercial contracts and agreements that are relating to the build of that technology. I've seen the pain of this personally in some of my own startups. It takes a long time to get this stuff built. What we're trying to achieve is protocol-based automation, where everyone communicates with a standard, talking the same language. And to correspond to that, we want to get away from the complex negotiation of legal agreements and the kind of, sometimes these data exchange contracts would take 6 to 12 months to agree, yeah? We actually want to make it more of a frictionless marketplace, yeah? Either you've got a market price, you've got standard terms and conditions, and you've got potentially commons data, which is free for everyone to use. And you actually want to have the smallest possible barrier to entry in order to make use of open commons data. It's often difficult to track and audit, and this is a major concern when you're talking about some of the more private data, which I think is a key topic for Ocean. The great thing that blockchain gives you is this immutable record of provenance. Yeah? So you can track exactly what has happened in every transaction on chain, and it's part of a public record. Now, I'll say a little bit more about that. That does not mean that we're putting everyone's data on the blockchain. It is the record of transactions that goes on the blockchain. The data itself can stay completely off the chain, and indeed, for various reasons, that's actually a good design decision. But the record is really important, and it's something that people can validate using either cryptographic techniques or access to the public blockchain. You're getting away from a situation where you need to manually verify that something is done to the state of cryptographic proofs. Now, this is still a very big research topic, but there's actually ways that you can prove that you did a computation that you said you were going to do. So, for example, if you can prove that you actually ran a particular algorithm, then you've got the ability to offer model training services, as an AI startup. You can actually guarantee that you did what you said, and there's ways to validate and verify this, and potentially this creates more of an open market in some of the compute power which is needed to support AI. So it's a very interesting topic. I can't go into too much because it's not actually my areas of expertise, but we've got some great researchers in Berlin who do a lot of work on the sort of zero knowledge proofs and some of these sort of cryptographic protocols. We want to get away from like the complexity and often slowness of commercial billing, and we say, well, this should be a utility token. You should just be able to have a simple method of exchange and exchanging value in return for the data or the services that you provide. And this is quite central to everything we do in Ocean, is that we are trying to make a system where there are incentives for everyone to participate and be good actors. We want people to bring good quality data. We want people to bring good quality algorithms, good quality services to the ecosystem. So it's very important that we have this utility token which actually enables people to exchange value at the same time as they provide the different services. The final one is very important, is often the traditional data sharing is very much point to point. You'd strike a contract with one other company or one other department or one other country in your organization, and you'd end up getting this mess of spaghetti of different protocols and different techniques being used. What we want to do is have an open ecosystem where everyone's talking the same language, and that language is basically mediated by the transactions on the blockchain, so everyone's basically able to interoperate. This is really important to lower the barriers to entry so people can actually participate. We are not offering a security token. I probably can't say too much about it because I don't know the precise technical legal differences, but it's a utility token. It's to enable people to do transactions on the network and to exchange data. Yeah. Okay. So I guess I'd like to draw a little analogy. One of the things that I found very interesting was what happened in another market, which was the world trade in merchandise. And I found this quite interesting graph. And this is basically the volume and value of world goods trade. And what you can see is it's sort of bobbling along at a pretty low level around 1950, 1960. And then suddenly, around 1970, something happens. And suddenly this growth starts to happen very quickly. And we see a massive rise, a sort of exponential rise almost, in the volume of traded goods around the world, which is interesting. So what actually happened here? Does anyone have a guess? Sorry? Bit before internet trading, I think, but good guess. No, that's not the answer. Not gold standard, no. Yep. That's basically it. I would say one thing. It was not proliferation of containers, because containers existed way before this. Containers were being used, hundreds of years before this. What was important was containerization standards. Yeah? They suddenly decided that the ISO that they're going to publish standards which made all the containers the same size or a certain set of standard sizes and had standard fittings. So you could attach a crane or standard crane attachments to the containers so you could lift them in and out of ships. Now, this is a game changer. Instead of having to deal with 1,000 different shapes of boxes of all kinds of different sizes, you can start building standardized infrastructure. You can build cranes, you can build container ships, you can build the attachments for lorries so that they can drag a container. There's a whole bunch of things that suddenly become possible and lower the barriers to trade if you're able to create a standard. Yeah? And that's a motivating part in what we're doing. We're trying to make it much cheaper, much more efficient to share data. The analogy sort of can be taken a bit further. What we're actually trying to do is enable supply lines for data. We want a situation where different people can add value in different ways in a data value chain, and their exchanges along this value chain happen using the shared protocol. So this is an example from a healthcare domain. Now, healthcare is a very interesting field. I've worked a lot with health data myself, and one of the interesting properties is most of it's extremely private. This is not stuff that you can make public. This is not stuff you can ship around the internet with low security levels. The risk is too high. Patient confidentiality risk. If you're a commercial organization, the reputational risk is enormous if you lose control of patient data. We've seen several cases where that's happened, and it's been very bad for the companies involved. So we don't want to share this data, or at least certainly not in the sort of personally identifiable form that needs to be protected. So what the Ocean Protocol enables is these kind of supply chains where the data, or the patient data, which is marked with the little key symbols here, only ever goes to the healthcare provider themselves, so this is the data about their own patients, and a secure broker who's been certified, has got the best possible security standards, and that maybe several healthcare providers have jointly in a consortium decided to trust with their data. So what is happening is the patient data is going to this secure broker. It's being merged from a number of different sources. And this is important. The value of AI models typically depends on bringing different independent variables together. So you need to merge data from various different sources in order to get the value out of it. That's why this healthcare provider can't do this themselves. Yeah? A, they may not have the AI people, but B, it actually needs to get merged with other data sets. Maybe government data sets, maybe other healthcare providers, maybe pharmaceutical companies. Yeah, that's why you need someone to act as something like a secure broker in these kind of situations. Now, we actually want to run some smart algorithms on this, and we've got a startup here, with some data scientists who've got some great algorithms, but they're a startup. No one's going to send them, a whole bunch of very confidential patient data. They don't have the security protocols in place. They're innovators. They've not got the infrastructure. So what they can do, of course, is they can actually create an algorithm that will do feature extraction on this data. So they don't actually need the data. They don't need to know the names or the emails or any of this. What they need is the ability to extract some particular indicators that they can then use to train an effective model. So they create a feature extraction algorithm. They know maybe the data format, the sample data. They send that using Ocean to the secure broker. The secure broker then runs it in their environment. And the data scientists get some training data with extracted features, but absolutely no personal information involved. They train their model, build a predictive model using that data, and then send the model back to the healthcare provider. The healthcare provider can then use the model on their actual patient data in order to do things like predicting risk of complications, disease risk sort of indicators, these kind of things, which are very important if you're trying to create an effective healthcare system. At the same time, you may also have the data commons, so publicly available data, which actually can help. This may help inform the development of the algorithm. It may help bring in some extra training examples. There's many cases where pre-training of models with random data or similar data can actually help the quality of the models. You've got all of this accessible in Ocean. And of course, you may be able to release some subset of data to other researchers who can then make use of it and actually test out different models. And maybe you'll get a model improvement. And ultimately, that's going to be better for patients if you can build better models in a collaborative way. So this is an illustration of the kind of data supply lines that we think are important to enable. Now, Ocean is not telling anyone how to do this. Yeah, it's up to the service providers, the innovators, to decide exactly how the data is going to flow, and most importantly, what controls they want to put on that data. Yeah, which data is going to stay within a secure environment, which data is willing to be shared, which data do they want to sell and try and monetize, or which data they want to publish to everyone as open data. But we're providing the tools effectively to enable this. So who's going to be doing this? Well, we see this as an ecosystem, ultimately, with a number of different participants playing different roles. This diagram sort of shows, at the heart of it, we have the keepers and the verifiers. So these are the people who run nodes on the network. They maintain the integrity of the network. They're not necessarily doing any data and AI work themselves at all. All they've got to do is make sure that the transactions happen correctly and that everyone's playing honest, because it's a trustless network. Yeah, there could be some bad actors participating in the network. The assumption is that as long as there's a majority of good actors, then you can make sure that the network stays completely secure and with good integrity. Around that core, we then have the service providers in the network. Now, these will be people like data marketplaces. Imagine if you want to run your own corporate data marketplace to monetize data that your corporation has, or indeed share data with your suppliers or your customers. We imagine different data marketplaces will spring up, operated by different people for different reasons. There may be research marketplaces, there may be open data marketplaces, there may be corporate marketplaces, there may be some internal marketplaces if a large organization wants to share data between their own divisions. There are also service providers. Service providers would be people providing things like compute power, the ability to run algorithms, machine learning, training technology. Yeah? These would all be service providers within the ocean network. And these are running off-chain. We're not using the blockchain to actually run these. So people can actually integrate their existing infrastructure. Let's say you're running something like a Spark compute cluster. You've already built it. You've already spent $2 million on it. Yeah? You're not going to throw that away for some new blockchain technique. You want to harness that power. So Ocean enables you to integrate that and just connect that to the Ocean network and make those capabilities available. Around that sort of core of service providers, we then have the people who, I guess, are the users of the network. These could be publishers. So I have a data asset. I want to sell it. I'm a publisher. Or I could be a consumer. I'm a researcher. I need to gather together some data in order to complete my PhD. I'm a consumer of data. Some people will be both publishers and consumers. Like imagine if you're a firm that specializes in market intelligence, you may be buying data in, you may then be analyzing it, compiling it, and then publish some curated results, yeah, that you've merged and cleaned and analyzed, which would be basically a value-added data service. So they'd both be a publisher and a consumer on Ocean. And of course, you may get other people playing key roles, for example, creating data, actually looking after data quality, maintaining data standards, referring people to good data sources, just being able to signpost. And we've got some interesting innovations enabling people to actually be incentivized with tokens for playing those roles in an effective way. And around that, of course, you then have the broader community. So we have, of course, most important, the public. We're doing this because we're actually trying to create benefits to society as a whole. And although they won't directly be using the Ocean network themselves, they would be beneficiaries through what the technology provides. But most importantly, they have rights that need to be protected. So as a citizen, I will be a data subject on many different data sets, and I want to know that those data sets are being looked after properly. And Ocean, through its provenance, can actually help in that management of the confidentiality and the protection of my rights. So I have an interest in this. And of course, regulators who would be interested in making sure that the people involved in the Ocean ecosystem are complying with relevant laws. And we're putting quite a lot of effort into developing the protocol in a way that makes it, I guess, consistent with the way that we expect regulations to develop. It's a hard thing to do since we're trying to design it for the whole world, but we think we've got some ways of making sure that the kind of trust requirements that are likely to be required by regulators and auditors can actually be enforced by service providers or even as part of the protocol itself. Okay. So as part of this, we have the Ocean Protocol token. This is a utility token that basically enables value to be exchanged on the network. So if you want to buy an asset, you can make the asset available for Ocean tokens. And there's some advantage of doing it as a utility token. I won't go too much into technical details, but you can do things with smart contracts like put the tokens into escrow. And then when your data or your service has been delivered, the service provider only then gets paid. So there's actually ways of making sure that the actual payment and dispute resolution and all of these kind of things are handled entirely through smart contracts, which is a very, very secure way of ensuring that no one gets cheated out of value here. Ways to get Ocean tokens: you can sell data. Yeah, if you want to actually monetize, turn your data into an asset, it's a great opportunity for many organizations that have large data assets. You can be a data marketplace. You can earn ocean tokens as commission or as for additional services provided as a market. You can earn ocean tokens for supporting the network by running nodes. And you can we've even got some methods where you can actually incentivize people for publishing open data, so maintaining the data commons. So I'm just going to go through now and talk about just some diagrammatically how some of this might work. And I'm going to sort of do a little bit of a comparison. This is pretty much what a traditional data marketplace would look like. Simplified diagram, but you basically have a publisher who wants to publish some data. They upload it to a marketplace, which then stores the data. And then a consumer will come along, and at some point they will buy the asset and they will download a copy of it. Okay? So nothing fundamentally wrong with this model. In fact, Dex had this kind of capability many years ago. But there are some challenges in the sort of data economy that we envisage in the future. First of all, this is kind of a centralized point of failure. Yeah, if this thing in the middle gets compromised, or if it goes down, all bets are off. All that data could be lost, and it's one quite significant point of risk. And secondly, of course, it doesn't solve the problem that all your transactions will have to be settled in some manual way. Yeah, you'll have to go have billing, commercial billing arrangements, contracts, etc. Still have to exist in this kind of model. So the first thing we do, if you imagine the evolution of how Ocean would change this, is we say, we're actually going to put a blockchain network behind it. And this does two very important things. First of all, it gives us that means of value exchange, so that we can put the smart contracts, we can have dispute resolution, we can have escrow for the tokens as value gets transferred. And secondly, it means, I think I alluded on an earlier slide, we get the provenance, we get the trust that the network has actually recorded a public log of all of the transactions. So we're already starting to get some of these more advanced capabilities. But this has still got the problem that this data is going to the consumer, someone who's bought this data. An actual copy of the data is going there. Yeah? And if we talk about trusted data, secure data, data that needs to get private, people's patient records, that is not really an acceptable model. Yeah? The risks of selling copies of data sets to people all around the world, sooner or later, one of them's going to get hacked. Whether it's intentional or unintentional, you will probably lose control of that data under this kind of model. So the next step is to say, well, okay, I want to do things with the data, but I don't want it to go to the consumer. Yeah? And this is where you put in a trusted compute kind of environment. Yeah? So in this case, the publisher is sending the data to a secure enclave. It's stored in the secure enclave, but it never leaves that place now. Yeah? The consumer never gets to see that data. But the consumer doesn't actually care. The consumer's most of the time not interested in the raw data itself. They want some insights out of that data, or they want a machine learning predictive model which was trained using that data. Yeah? So actually they want the results of running a computation on the data. And that's what this secure enclave does. It enables the data to be processed to create a result set, and only the result set goes back to the consumer. And this is where now we're getting to the point of data sharing without sharing data. It is not the raw data that you want, it is results that you want as a data consumer. Yeah? And this kind of model enables you to do that. So it's already much more powerful. But then you're still dependent on this one secure enclave. So the ultimate evolution is to say, well, actually, we're going to break these roles up. And we're going to give those roles to people who are best able to do each kind of job, whether it's security, secure storage, whether it's compute, whether it's a startup with a clever AI algorithm. there's no need that this is all in one place. And in fact, there could be hundreds of them. As long as you talk a common language, you could have thousands of different participants in the ecosystem, all playing these roles in different ways. You may have a very trusted storage provider, maybe running on some of the best infrastructure in the world. You trust them to store your asset. The marketplace itself might give you a great interface and a great way to discover assets, but why should your marketplace be storing assets? It doesn't actually need to. Yeah, I'd rather my asset gets stored by the highly secure storage provider. You may get also a secure compute provider, yeah, and have ways that you could transfer the data from one secure provider to another secure provider. That may be something that you're willing to trust. And in this case, the compute provider can use its GPU clusters to run big algorithms, machine learning, deep learning, and you actually get the results and the models, the trained models, or the result data sets out. And your consumer, of course, can be using a completely different marketplace. Yeah, there's no reason why we want to force everyone to go to one place to buy and sell data. If we've got this sort of common standard, then these should be interoperable. Yeah, anyone should be able to trade data across marketplaces, between marketplaces. So what we're doing is we're decentralizing the roles in the data economy so everyone can do the part that they're best placed to play, which I think is great. It creates fantastic opportunities for startups, for corporations who maybe haven't got the AI skills but do have the data they want to monetize. And I think that's part of the, people talk a lot about decentralization in the blockchain world. It's not all about blockchain tech. It's about decentralizing the accountability and the opportunity to different organizations that are able to take it. So I think one of the things that maybe I've sort of implied, but maybe I think is worth repeating, is in all of these cases, there are decisions to be made, yeah, about how much you are willing to trust others, yeah? And I think trust is going to be very central in the future data economy. And you may be willing your asset, again, to be shared, open data, or you may want to make sure it's kept extremely tight, perhaps never giving it to anyone else, only keeping it on your own secure environment. As Ocean, we want to enable all of these different kinds of levels of trust. So basically, our principle is that the rules to asset access are set by the publishers of those assets. It's your data, something you're responsible for maintaining. You must decide how much trust you're willing to give others in the ecosystem. So this is an illustration of, I think, probably the most important levels of trust. There's a couple more fine-grained distinctions. But at the top, we have like totally open data. Yeah, I'm willing to give it to anyone. It can be free. I don't mind if people copy it and mirror it and cache it for performance reasons. I just want to share it with the world. You then have data that's qualified. So qualified access would be, I'm not willing to give it to anyone, but I'm willing to give it to anyone who meets certain criteria. And an example of such a criteria would be, I know their legal identity. Yeah? So I've got some form of recourse if they do break the terms and conditions or if they do abuse the data that's been provided. And that's a service that a marketplace can offer. A marketplace can say, we're going to verify users to make sure that they have a legal identity and that they are who they say they are. You then get restricted kind of data assets. And these would be ones where, for example, imagine if 10 companies come together to share supply chain data. It's commercially sensitive. They don't want it going out to the whole world. But they've got like a white list of collaborators who they're willing to share that data with. So you can have like a restricted subset. And finally, you can keep the data completely private. If you want to keep the data within your own environment and only run your own algorithms on it and maybe just share a few very limited, carefully controlled result sets to others, that's also in the options that you can have. And that really, I guess, is data sharing without sharing data, using the protocol and using the service providers configured in a way that manages the access to what you as a publisher demand. And of course, increasingly citizens and the public will demand because they want to see their data protected. So that's pretty much all I had in terms of slides. I was going to say just a couple of things. First of all, little plug, we are looking for people to join the Ocean team. So, particularly if you're interested in blockchain technology, data exchange, data engineering, very happy to talk about that. And obviously you can connect with us in various different channels. Final thing I would say is we'll be giving to any attendees tonight who would like them. We've got some data vouchers, data credits, I think is the correct word, for anyone who wants them. Yvonne at the back of the room will be able to give those out to you if you want to go and register with her after the talk. So yeah, I think that's all I have in terms of slides, but I'd love to have a conversation, so if anyone wants to ask any questions or fire off a topic for discussion, very happy to take any thoughts now. Yep.
Yeah, you see, the missing link is to be that you have only one layer. Not this one, before this one, not one, sorry. Yeah, you see here, no, before, yeah. I think it's all into three into one. That's the one.
Yeah.
Now, when you look at it that you have, basically you have only the value factor. And the question you have is one layer, that is the exchange. You don't have an additional, that's the exchequer. And the exchequer is vital, it must be, and is crucial in a balancing factor in terms of oversight and whatever not, which you don't have. No, you can't do it without an oversight facility that to ensure that yours is not overriding, overheating, over everything over. So the question is that the exchequer is not there. So you imagine that UK, for example, you have the exchange without the exchequer, then it's just something is missing. So I couldn't give you the IP that we are working on, which is very much on that particular contingency factor, because everything else we say, where's your contingency? Where's your contingency? What about your, something that you see that we have a missing link and the gap is there. So minding the gap, there's going to be the gap. So I'll leave it to you. Thanks.
So what's the question there?
So the question is that, as I said to you, you have one layer instead of at least another layer to counter-check your shortcoming, your oversight. And that's it, what I'm trying to say, because with the exchange alone, that is why what is existingly in the marketplace, you find, board of their advisors and so on. There's none of them have got, the oversight committee at all. There's none.
Yeah.
So it is an insider for insider, not for external and fair, evaluation. So the validation is sometimes questionable. Thanks.
Okay. No, I mean, I think I get the general point. I focused. Hello. I focused rather more on the sort of the technology side today, and one of the things that I haven't said much about is governance, and I do think this is a very important part. I guess it's hard for me to go into too much details on this right now, but I would say blockchain opens up some new opportunities for governance that didn't exist before. And one of those is the possibility for the community to validate that the system does what it says it does. And in terms of all the smart contracts being open, they can be inspected. People can say, if I pay my tokens, what will happen on the network? That's actually possible with blockchain technology. And we think that gives an extra level of trust. That it's not like a black box where you send your money in and you don't quite know what happens with the payments. You can actually inspect all of this. The code's open, the network is open. If you want to, you can run a node on the network and validate the transactions yourself. Yeah, you can become a keeper. So that's an opportunity. I think there's a separate question then of governance of the network going forward. And that's one of the reasons for the Ocean Protocol Foundation. It's a Singapore-based non-profit which basically has a mandate to govern the network, make sure that its network is developed in the interests of the various participants in the ecosystem. And I think in the longer term, we would aspire to the network to effectively be run by the community of people who are users of the Ocean Protocol. I have not done a cross comparison. You may want to ask some of my colleagues about that. Any other questions?
When you were explaining the data matching, I'm like a publisher and let's say the purchaser, but it's not that symmetrical, because I've seen, let's say, if an AI engineer is doing a medical data research, whatever the brain scan data or whatever, then the hospitals have all the data, but they're not willing to give that data to the researchers. And if you have access for the data, then you have to literally like go through so many procedures, bow down to them, and at the end of the day, that it's almost like really minimal access. So I was wondering, it's easier said than done that everybody need to own their data, like a data sovereignty and all that. But do you think the existing, how do you call it, existing power or existing people who already have the data will let that data go that easily without much drama, you think? That this will happen just naturally or in a small doses?
It's a good question. I mean, I think it's down, as I say, to the data owner how much they want to release. I think one thing that I think is very encouraging is the number of people who come to us who have data and want to make use of it and they want to share it. Yeah? They have a lot of very good concerns about, will it be protected? Can I be sure about where it goes? Will my personally identifiable information be properly protected? But they typically want to get value out of the data. So we're working with the National Neuroscience Institute, for example, in Singapore, and they have a lot of data on Parkinson's patients. And they want to share that with researchers who can build new models of care enabled by AI for Parkinson's patients. So there's like techniques using wearables where you can actually use that to get the right medication dosage, for example. You can only do that if you have access to the data to actually train those models. So it's these kind of use cases where the data owners actually have quite a strong incentive to start sharing their data under the right terms and conditions. If we can give them the right tools and the right capabilities to do that, they generally want to. There's a modification of this diagram, actually, which we're experimenting with. Does anyone know Jupyter, the data science toolkit? Yeah, a few. What we've actually prototyped is the ability to run a Jupyter server, effectively, within the secure enclave, so that people can basically have a sandbox where they can come in and do something with the data in a way that's completely tracked and audited. For example, this is the kind of thing you might do with medical research cases where you want to get someone to actually come in and look at the data, but you don't want to send a copy of the data. So there's a lot of innovation, I think, that can be enabled by service providers to access data and make use of data in different ways. And we do see a demand for it. Corporates want to monetize their data assets. Medical organizations want to build better models of patient care, want to contribute to research. People want to share with the people in their supply chain so they can build more efficient supply chains. There's a lot of incentives to share data, providing you can give people the trust and assurance that it's going to be protected properly, and providing you can lower the barriers to entry so that it's not a very expensive, multi-million-dollar effort to make it work. So the signs are encouraging so far.
Are there any other organization doing a similar work as you do? I'm thinking particularly about what's the difference with, or maybe you know the Singularity Net. Is that a similar concept, or maybe you can explain us what's the difference?
I actually tend not to focus too much on what other organisations are doing because we're a bit busy doing this. I don't think anyone is doing exactly the same thing. I mean, we have a very, we're not trying to build a product, yeah? We're trying to build a protocol that enables other people to build products and solutions. And I think we're quite unique in that regard in this space. I know other people are trying to build utility networks for other things. But I believe we're relatively unique in the way that we approach this problem. There are other organisations that focus on very specific things, yeah, like AI. There's plenty of AI startups trying to do, for example, federated machine learning, or very, very specific, something for a specific domain, yeah. I think we're quite domain agnostic. There's nothing in the Ocean Protocol says that this must be healthcare data, or this must be finance data, or even that you have to use it for AI. AI is our main use case, but you can actually use this for traditional data exchange, for data warehousing if you want to, yeah? So I think we're relatively unique in that respect, but you know, I can't, the space is moving so fast, I can't always comment on what everyone else is doing.
First of all, thank you for your presentation. I like the slide that you showed the boost of containers usage, because my question comes from that concept that are you in touch with or collaboration with any standard organizations like ISO to make this happen in reality? For example, if as a startup we collaborate with you and adapt our system to your protocol, what guarantees that next day the standard comes up to be, you know, turns out to be something completely different, for example?
Yeah. Well, first, I think it's early for us to build an ISO standard around data exchange, to be honest. Obviously, that's an ambition, but I don't think that's something we can do yet. So we are at a stage where we haven't yet launched a network. The network will be launched March, April next year. And we really need to see a standard in use before we can learn enough about how it's used, where the pain points are, improve the standard, and maybe in 5 years' time it'll be suitable for ISO standardization. But I think it's a bit premature to do that right now. What I'm hoping is we provide something that is useful to a lot of different people in a lot of different use cases, that enables people to experiment and innovate and you know, create value in different ways for their different industries. And in that way, it sort of becomes a de facto standard. Yeah, standard that becomes a standard because it's adopted. I take my inspiration a bit from, you know, the W3C and some of the web standards. Some of these standards are in use for quite a while before they actually, you know, become official web standards. I think HTTP was in the works for quite a few years before they even got it to draft status. So it takes time to develop these kind of things, and the Ocean Protocol is more complicated than HTTP because it has a lot of different considerations. So it will take time and it will evolve, and you know, I think we'll probably be on, you know, maybe version 2.3 before we start thinking about an official, a sort of international standard. But that doesn't mean that people can't start using it as an effective standard to actually do things. So that's kind of where I stand on that stuff.
That's why when I put your question, because your intro, to say that between this and this, and then missing link, the first intro, then you say that that's exactly it is because you miss, you know, the crux of the proposition. That's a harder method, because there's always a gap there.
Okay, I'd love to have a conversation with you afterwards to find out. There's definitely something there. Yes.
Thank you for the great presentation. And I came from Japan. There soon our society will have a super aging society. Beyond 65 years old will be soon 40% of our population, shrinking population. So this concept is very much necessary, but not happening yet. And as you said, aggregated data is very important. And I heard in Singapore, government announced to aggregate data in the Ministry of Health with the startup data, because that is very important. I brought one company from Taiwan to Japan who does the diabetes solution. And in Taiwan, already government, Ministry of Health, started to aggregate medical data to startup data.
Yep.
So that's very important. And also another concept you mentioned, like hash smart contract, automatically paying the promised payment. So rather than having a centralized insurance company who may monopolize the profit, so we can decentralize profit sharing, because this connection is happening still in Japan. Like, people work hard to make themselves healthier, but the saved profit in the future is still kept at the insurance association.
Yeah.
Like, not paid back for incentivizing the people doing effort.
Yeah.
So hashtag contract is very important. So
Yeah.
are you a part of a Singapore policy aggregating Ministry of data to a private company or on the sandbox startup for this concept?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I mean, we're working quite extensively with the IMDA here in Singapore, who's one of the regulatory government bodies with a lot of interest in data privacy and data protection. And as part of that, we've set up what we call them, development sprints, although they're more like marathons than sprints, which is working with a number of different companies in different sectors to explore different use cases. And those we have agreed to set up regulatory sandboxes, effectively. So the regulator said, okay, you can try things out. We'll give you sort of the go-ahead and approval to test out the technology and some of the ideas, which is important for the companies involved, because hey, they don't want to take risks with the regulator, and so that gives them some extra assurance. And I think Singapore has been very proactive, I'd say, in encouraging innovation around the sort of data and AI space. So it's been very, very good to work with the government on this kind of stuff. And I think there's great opportunities in government around the world. I don't know the Japan context so well, but every government, I know the UK better. Every government has problems around this, about data sharing, typically between their own departments. One thing you did say, you mentioned insurance and the way that value gets exchanged. One idea that we've been looking at quite a lot is the possibility of using the smart contracts, and probably can't be done purely with smart contracts, but the smart contracts and a couple of other techniques to actually find a way of rewarding data subjects directly. So if I sign up for my data to be sold, for maybe research purposes or marketing research purposes, well, can I get a share of or a commission, if you like, when my data is traded and exchanged? And we think there's some interesting opportunities there. Great example, yeah? That sounds like a very interesting one. So I mean, that's the kind of thing that we expect to see a huge amount of innovation in this space, like exactly what the payment model is, exactly how the data gets shared. How do you tell if someone's data is more useful than someone else's data? There's a lot of interesting questions to be solved here, and no one has all the answers. We're just trying to give them tools so that people can build solutions that try out these things and actually implement some of these kind of innovations. So, yeah, interesting space. And thank you.
So, is there any control on the the algorithm itself that's run by the consumer. Maybe a good example would be DNA. If I wanted to let my healthcare provider check my DNA for some sign, I'd be expecting them to come out with a true-false answer. Is that actually protected, or can they, maybe like a bad actor could be kind of slowly leaking data to themselves?
Yeah. So you have to trust, depending on exactly the situation, you have to trust someone usually. Yeah. So if I'm running a secure enclave and a consumer asks me to run an algorithm, and all that algorithm does is copy the full input to the output, then obviously my data's leaked. Yeah. So I either need to trust the consumer and let them run whatever algorithm they like, or I need to have some way of validating that the output hasn't leaked private information. Now, there's lots of different ways you can do that, and we do leave this as a choice to the service provider how they want to implement this. So they could, for example, have a vetting system whereby the consumer submits an algorithm, they check the algorithm, maybe run it in a sort of a test run, say that's okay, then give the approval, and then it can get run. Obviously, that puts a manual step in the change, but that may give some people the assurance they need that that algorithm is being properly vetted. The other option is that, and we think this will be quite common, is that the service provider makes some standard algorithms available. Yeah? So if all you want to do is extract some statistics or aggregated data, you can basically make that available and say, okay, we're okay with people running these whitelisted algorithms that we've already pre-approved. So we think that would be quite common as well. So there's a number of mechanisms. Again, this is a space which is wide open for innovation on exactly what kind of algorithms you allow and how you parameterize them and how you ensure that particularly private data has been protected. So. Any other ideas? Yeah.
I have an impression blockchain is focused on the decentralization, and but I'm not aware that how efficient for transfer the data, especially the huge data for AI to process.
Yeah. So I think the blockchain is an area that's going through incredible innovation right now. It's exceptionally early days. A lot of the current blockchain tech is far from being able to handle big data workloads on chain. Yeah? So you wouldn't want to be doing your image processing using smart contracts. You know, it just wouldn't work. It's not efficient enough. You want to be harnessing the existing big data technology. Yeah? You want to be using GPUs. You want to be, for deep learning, for example, you want to be using things like Spark clusters for very big data sets, the kind of things that telcos have and banks have in place already. You're not going to replace those with blockchain tech anytime soon, yeah? Which is why we keep the blockchain stuff as a sort of separate piece from the actual data infrastructure. So the blockchain holds everything together, makes sure we've got that integrity, make sure we have the ability of value exchange and we have the trust of having the smart contracts. But it doesn't do the heavy lifting of data processing, data storage, and running heavy-duty algorithms. Now, that may change in the future. There may come a time when the blockchain technologies evolve to the point where you're happy actually running your machine learning on the blockchain. But currently, that's quite a few years off still. So, yeah, you're right. I mean, the blockchain tech itself is not suitable for a lot of the data processing, data sharing, in the sense of actually doing the hard work. It is very suitable, though, for tracking the provenance and for exchanging value and for giving us that sort of security assurance, which is what we're using it for. It's a classic. You want to use the right tool for the right job.
I've two questions. In this diagram, right, what you're providing is only the ocean protocol, the agent, and a network. The other boxes is something which the service provider or anyone else would be building. Is that what I understand correctly?
I probably can't go into full details of this right now, but basically the protocol determines the interactions between different participants. Yeah? So when there's a line that crosses between participants, the protocol defines how that works. Okay. And the protocol also defines some data standards. Okay. So for example, what metadata do you store about an asset? Okay. Yeah? It defines the way that the interactions work with the blockchain so that you can actually run the smart contracts. And although the protocol doesn't define it, what we are building is open source reference implementations for service providers. So we've built a storage provider, yeah? You don't have to use our storage provider. If you want to, it's open source, it's free for everyone to use, but if you want to run your own, with your own technology, you can. As long as it follows the protocol, it will interoperate. But that's not part of the protocol, that's just part of what we're providing as DEX.
So the above boxes are, in a way, reference implementation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the second question I have is you spoke about standardization, right? That's your aim. Okay. Would you consider open sourcing the ocean protocol?
It will all be open source.
So it will be open source?
It will be open source, yes.
And is it not today?
It hasn't launched yet. So it will be launched in March, April next year.
Okay.
So we're still in the pre-launch phase. Very active development. We've got lots of things working, but we still need to go through some development checks. We still need to do security insurance, particularly around the smart contracts. We've got to make sure that this stuff is rock solid and secure for us to launch it to the general environment.
So you have a community who can contribute to this development in the future?
Certainly the plan is that everything will be open source. Anyone will be able to contribute to the open source implementations. The on-chain stuff will be a bit harder to change because that's effectively built into the network and the smart contracts. So once you put the smart contracts up there, they're there forever, yeah? So that's a bit more complicated to manage. But certainly in terms of the reference implementations for the service providers, storage, compute providers, that's going to be open for everyone to participate in. Yeah. We don't have one that's sort of being run for external people to test right now. That's not to say that you couldn't download a few things and get it working, but I wouldn't recommend it probably because it's all in active development right now. We will hopefully be running one of those quite soon. Yeah.
Thank you. Maybe a tricky question. If you don't have yet a clear timeline, that means that you are still at a very early research stage. Don't you think that if you wait too much, quantum computing will be there, and it will be all centralized computing and storage that will take the power, and not the decentralized?
That's a very good question. I think that if I just paraphrase the question, you're saying, okay, we're building decentralized tech, but it's not launched yet, and sooner or later, some large player in the internet space is going to say, hey, we can store it, we can run the compute, we can do a bit of everything, we've got all the infrastructure already. I think people will do that. Yeah, I think the thing is, there's never going to be a single one repository of all the world's data, yeah? And it doesn't matter how big you are, yeah? You are not going to be the world, yeah? in the data space. And this was actually a lesson that I think DEX had in the early days, because we were like a centralized marketplace, and we go, well, how do we get more data on board? And people go, well, we want to store our data here, not with you. And sooner, you're never going to get 100% of the world's data. Maybe you get 10%. Maybe you're the biggest data store in the entire world. Maybe you get 20%. But even then, you're leaving this huge amount of value untapped. And we came to the conclusion that it's only by decentralizing and enabling people to interoperate that you can actually harness 100% of the world's data, And I think the Ocean name has something to allude to that.
Yeah, so maybe one thing, that means that everyone is using your protocol. It's not because it's decentralized that everyone is using it. So you need all the users to go for this technology and this standard. And why you in that case?
Well, A, someone's got to do it, but B, that people don't have to use it. And I think it's very important that it doesn't all have to be on Ocean Protocol. There can be bridges to other networks and other systems. And certainly, when we've talked with people who already have a lot of data and already have a lot of compute power, they're not going to rewrite that internally. They're just going to provide an adapter and a bridge. And the bridge, a small lightweight adapter, is actually not that big a project for some of these guys to actually take on, particularly if you've provided them with a reference implementation that they can customize. So, we see it as like being, okay, we're providing a layer that enables people to plug into this common ecosystem. If people find value from it, and if it helps them to monetize their assets, or it helps them to access the assets they need, then we've created value, and that's good enough for us. Okay.
Someone, right? You have to have a trusted third party to either store your data or to do the compute. So how is this trust going to be administered and monitored?
Well, I mean, I'd say there's a few. That's a very nuanced question, yeah? Why would you trust someone and who do you trust? Is probably too big a topic, and we could do a whole other night talking about that. I'd say there's a few things. One, we expect that some players in the ecosystem will become like hubs for trust. Yeah, and I think particularly the people who run marketplaces will do this. Yeah, so a marketplace will start validating service providers and say, this is a trusted service provider, they've passed our audit, they've passed our credentials. Regulators may step in and say, we're actually going to regulate some of this. Yeah, we have some regulation, for example, about geographical constraints. Data cannot be taken out of this country, and they're going to provide some kind of audit or credential that some people would sign up to in order to provide that assurance. So we expect to see hubs of trust and reasons for trusting people and credentials to start developing in different sectors of the ecosystem for slightly different reasons. And then marketplaces, of course, can highlight that. You can put your blue check mark or whatever on this is a trusted service provider. I think there's going to be a lot of innovation there. I agree. In most cases, in some cases, you have to trust someone. Yeah. And the people who make themselves the most trustworthy and the people who provide the best guarantees of trust will be the most successful. It is a market after all. I would say there's some interesting technology which enables things to be completely trusted in the crypto side. So like some of the stuff around zero knowledge proofs and like proof of computation and some of the homomorphic encryption stuff offers potential that you don't have to trust someone, but you can still give them work to do, yeah? And the SGX, secure compute architecture, some of the hardware solutions as well. So there are things that enable you to buy services without trusting a third party. I think that's still in the sort of formative stage, research stage, quite a lot of that. But we'd like to take advantage of that for the use cases where it makes sense. Yeah, cool. Anything else? Okay, well, Thanks very much, everyone, for some great questions, and enjoyed discussing these topics with you all. Hope that's helpful. I'll be handing out some cards afterwards. Do remember to drop by Yvonne if you want to get some ocean data credits for use when the network goes live. And look forward to further discussions. Thank you very much.